Welcome to CBC Windsor News at 6. I'm Meg Roberts. Thanks so much for spending part of your evening with us tonight. A local family has been caught up in a controversial provincial law that enables hospitals to charge patients who refuse to move into a long-term care bed. They've now paid thousands of dollars. Plus, members of the local Conservative Party are rallying tonight over the federal government's carbon tax hike. And a school board trustee says she's reconsidering her position after last night's board meeting, calling the renaming of Kingsville's new school a disgrace. For the first time, the Ontario government is confirming that several patients have been charged fees relating to a controversial law. The province came forward with that information after CBC Windsor spoke to someone whose loved one paid thousands due to the policy. The CBC's Jennifer LaGrassa brings us this exclusive story.
Tamara Moyer looks at the $5,200 bill that her father-in-law paid. That's because the family refused to move him from a Southwestern Ontario hospital to a long-term care home that they didn't want. Ontario's controversial Bill 7, which fully came into effect in November 2022, allows hospitals to charge patients who don't move to an available long-term care bed $400 a day. Advocates say the law forces vulnerable seniors to make difficult choices.
They really bully you and they really try to pressure you into that decision. And it's stressful enough when you've got somebody in the hospital and then you're trying to make decisions like that.
Moyer says her 93-year-old father-in-law was recovering from pneumonia and a fall that left him with a large gash in his head that needed staples. They denied the readily available bed because it wasn't in a convenient location. 13 days later, he got accepted to a home that they wanted. At that point, the bill had grown to more than $5,000.
I'm getting tired of hearing that no fine's been issued when our father-in-law was issued a fine.
But it wasn't the cost of the bill that made Moyer speak out. It was the fact that even after her father-in-law paid the hefty fee, she kept seeing media coverage that said no one had been issued any charges, according to the government. When CBC News first reached out about this and said it had seen a copy of an invoice, the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Long-Term Care sent a joint statement on March 26th. It said that no hospital has reported to Ontario Health or to the Ministry of Health or Ministry of Long-Term Care that a charge has been laid. But after asking more questions about what the process for reporting is and whether that exists, the Ministry of Health then confirmed that of the 20,000 people moved to care homes, 7 people have been billed. It said that the reporting process hadn't been followed, so the ministries and their ministers weren't made aware of charges. Even though both Ontario Health and the agency that oversees the long-term care home placement process, Home and Community Care Support Services, both knew charges existed. One lawyer found this concerning.
I think that the government doesn't pay enough attention at all in any part of the healthcare system as to what these charges are and who's charging them and in what circumstances. So I think it's very concerning in this case, given the magnitude of these charges, how much they are.
Moving forward, the government said it will be kept informed of future charges.
For more on this now, we bring in the CBC's Jennifer LaGrassa. Jen, you said the government found that the proper reporting process wasn't being followed. What is that process?
So the Ministry of Health told me in an email that when a person gets discharged from the hospital and refuses a long-term care bed, the care coordinator is required to report that to the CEO of the agency which oversees the long-term care placement process. It's called Home and Community Care Support Services. That CEO is then expected to inform Ontario Health and the Ontario Health Regional Officer with a letter. Ontario Health officials are then expected to report these cases back to the ministries. But that wasn't happening in this case.
Jen, you also spoke with Tamara Moyer after hearing back from the government. Knowing that there are additional charges, what does she think now?
So she was glad to hear that by presenting her story, she pushed the government to be more transparent, but she is surprised that this hadn't been properly tracked from the start. She believes that the more information that can be shared on this bill and when it's being used, that can help inform the impact that it's having.
Thanks so much for that, Jen. That's the CBC's Jennifer LaGrassa. 5 months after a cyber attack took place at 5 hospitals in southwestern Ontario, thousands of people will be receiving letters informing them that their information was in fact stolen.
We remain committed to a shared service program amongst the 5 hospitals for efficiency and optimization. And we continue to support the work that they have done to restore and restoration as well as recovery over the last several months. And we continue to look at best practices to enhance digital services across the region.
The hospitals that were affected included those in Sarnia, Chatham, Kent, Leamington, as well as Windsor Regional Hospital and Hotel Dieu Grace Healthcare. Letters for anyone affected will begin to be mailed out on April 8th. Blue Water Health is the only hospital where electronic medical records were stolen. At the other hospitals, the breach include patient information and some employee information. Some patients overlap across the 5 hospitals, meaning they could get multiple letters. Windsor Regional Hospital is sending out the fewest number of letters with nearly 28,000. Erie Shores will be notifying the most number of patients, 102,000. An inquest into a man who shot and killed himself during a police standoff is wrapping up. Today, a jury heard there are some new procedures at both Windsor Regional Hospital and Windsor Police. Chad Romanic was brought into the emergency room at the hospital by police. He was suffering from a crisis. Just days later, a police standoff with Romanic at his Windsor home where he was found dead in the garage. A vice president with the hospital said there are new procedures now to get a person having a mental crisis psychotherapy faster, but said during the inquest more needs to be done to simplify access to additional services. Last May, a pilot project began pairing officers with nurses. A police inspector testified today one of those teams would have been involved during a crisis like Romanic's if the program would have been in place. He recommended services need to be readily available on weekends and off hours. Tomorrow, lawyers will give closing submissions and deliver a number of recommendations they want the jury to consider. Axe the Tax is a slogan that's taken off with conservatives, and local PC members are taking that literally tonight. The party's Windsor West Association is hosting a rally at Bad Axe Throwing on Dougal Avenue. CBC's Dawson Chen is there tonight. Dawson, why did they decide to hold this event?
Meg, the Tories have been campaigning for months with attack ads pointing to the federal carbon tax. Axe the Tax is a slogan that's been used for various political purposes for decades, but tonight, at this venue, it's being meant literally. Bad Axe Throwing is an entertainment venue where patrons use throwing axes on targets. The Conservative Party's Windsor West Association is inviting participants to bring their gas bills or other bills associated with the carbon tax and use those as targets. Al Tashuba, president of the association, joins us to answer some questions. Al, why are you holding this event tonight?
Well, I think the symbolism is obvious. The Conservative platform, number one, is axe the tax. Next, build the homes, fix the budget, stop the crime. But axe the tax is key because it's economically based, and it's certainly something that will help Canada's economy all the way through. There's many other ways to improve the climate than adding a ridiculous carbon tax on Canadians that are burdened enough.
But the carbon tax has rebates, and the federal government says many households will actually end up with more dollars because of those rebates. So why throw the axe on this particular tax issue?
I think the parliamentary budget officer made it very clear that the calculations that the Liberals did was not accurate. Canadians are going to be losing money. You can't tax them to death and then give them a small portion of the rebate back. It doesn't work out. This tax is a burden on food, on driving, on Canadians, on heating. It's ridiculous. When the Conservatives come in power, this tax will be axed.
The federal government says carbon pricing is part of their plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. What's the Conservative Party's plan to address greenhouse gas emissions?
There's about 1,000 better things you can do than try to instill some carbon tax scam on Canadians. We certainly can export more viable natural gas, liquefied energy to Europe. We can add more nuclear power. We need to scrap the tax. It's not an environmental plan. It's sheerly just a tax scam on Canadians.
Thanks for your time, Al.
Thank you.
The event is running from now until 10 p.m., $20 per person, no age limits. Back to you, Meg.
Thanks so much for that, Dawson. That's the CBC's Dawson Ken reporting live from Bad Axe Throwing. Public School Board trustees spent roughly 10 minutes last night changing the name of the new Kingsville school for a second time with no debate. In a 7-4 vote, trustees decided last night to change the new K-12 school to Erie Migration District School. Trustee Julia Burgess said the previous name, Erie Migration Academy, had a vulgar acronym that was missed during the vetting process. Burgess put forward both of the school's names herself after a school committee shortlisted suggestions of its own. The community pushed back, even protesting the name back in February. Last night's meeting was adjourned within 10 minutes after Burgess made the motion to change. She called for the vote on the motion, closing discussions before other trustees could speak. One trustee left before the meeting was adjourned. She has said she's reconsidering her future position with the board, calling the renaming a disgrace.
I'm extremely disappointed. I'm extremely frustrated, and I think this whole thing was a terrible mess. What they did tonight was shut everybody up. They didn't want trustees to talk. They didn't want to hear anything from anybody in the community. All they wanted to do was shove it through, and that's what they did.
When the shadow from the solar eclipse passes over the vineyards in Essex County on Monday, lots of people will be gathered together sipping glasses of wine. One of those wineries spoke with Windsor Morning host Amy Dodge today about what they have planned.
We now have over 230 people booked to come out and have lunch and have wine and have popcorn and show the event. And I'm just really, really excited about this. It really didn't become clear to me about how significant this was until about 3 months ago, when there's all kinds of scientific articles about it, all kinds of tourism interests. And it's just people are going to see this as a once in a lifetime. I remember one in the 1960s, and I think I'm going to be gone well before we have the next one in the 44. So it was about 3 months ago. So we, fortunately, Puppy was giving out additional glasses. We were able to take advantage of that, and that allowed us to get up to the number that we have.
Colette, obviously there are so many interesting things about what's going to take place Monday with the eclipse. The thing that I am most interested in, actually, is that temperature dropping potentially in the matter of, minutes, or
right.
temperatures getting up to 10 degrees lower.
And I'm glad that that's what you're asking me about, because for 3 weeks, folks have been asking me for the forecast. And yes, I can give a general overview, but it's hard to have real accuracy or confidence until we get a little bit closer. So yes, it is a pretty quick thing that happens, though, right? Like, it moves through, essentially that core area where we get the totality with a couple of minutes. So yes, we can see that temperature drop, maybe 5 degrees or more, which is kind of cool. And the other thing I want folks to keep in mind with that is it can make animals behave differently too, because they might think it's nighttime, or and so you have to be a little more careful. I'm an animal lover, wildlife lover. You have to be a little more careful on the roads too, if you happen to be out driving and not just standing around watching it with your eclipse glasses.
I never thought about that, but okay, protect the animals. I get it.
And don't worry, Meg, I am going to give a forecast too. We will get there, but I'm just going to put more emphasis on it once we get a little bit closer. But you'll see, I've got Monday in there on the 5-day, and it was looking great. Now it's not looking so good. I don't want anyone to worry about it yet. Alrighty. This is something to worry about, though. This massive system. I was standing here last night and showing all the active weather, severe weather stateside, and sure enough, a massive tornado outbreak, at least 20. Some of these need to be confirmed over about 9 states. That line of storms, much of it now firing up there over the waters, not great for shipping lanes, but certainly much better on land. But then we've got this area of low pressure that's still going to be pushing some of its energy out, and as it does, it's going to be pulling in much colder air. And that's when we're starting to see that mixing down, and we see the transition in many areas from rain to snow, and that snow line starting to sink from east to west. Now, we may have a few wet flurries. We're not going to deal with too much more than that, but let's take you through everything going on. If you will be on the roadways, you got to be aware there is a special weather statement off towards the Toronto region, up towards Barrie, into eastern Ontario, winter weather travel advisories further east from there, rainfall warnings, snowfall warnings. The nation's capital may be looking at 15-20 centimeters of snow. This is very wet stuff. It's going to compact, and a lot of it melt too, because the ground ground is still warmer at this time of year, but still, that's significant snow into April. It hasn't been so bad then when you consider all that. You know, we had clouds today, we had some gusty winds at times. It hasn't been all that bad in terms of the moisture. The sustained winds have even backed off. I will just push this ahead, though, just to show you the forecast winds. Although they kind of die back, they get a little gusty again as we get towards Friday. And even Friday, we're still under the influence of the system. And then it finally moves away and we break out of it as we head towards the weekend. So kind of in between the situation with the heavier rains that are off to the east. This is lighter stuff here, but this is still wrapping around, and it is going to be pushing back into our skies at times. So the precipitation will generally be light, mostly as rain or a mix, but some wet flurries at times in there too. Off and on with that wraparound all the way into Friday, still dealing with cloud cover, still some wet conditions potentially later on Friday, and then it moves away. A few more millimeters of rain when you put it all together, yes. I would not take this really into account, a centimeter or two of snow, because I think it's just not really going to be able to accumulate. It's just going to be melting away for us. Overnight temperatures down to about 2 to 3 degrees, so do know it's going to be cooler as we go towards tomorrow morning, and that's why we're going to see some of that mixing. And I've got to, with my last few moments here, get you to the 5-day forecast, because I did mention that we would get all the way to the eclipse on Monday. Mild temperatures other than when it's passing over, but some clouds in there too.
Okay, we're keeping our eye on Monday, but you're making no promises yet.
Yeah, let's meet back here tomorrow and then Friday.
Okay, I can do that.
I'll keep fine-tuning it for you, Meg.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Colette.
You're welcome.
We've got more news coming up. Stay tuned. With more schools focusing on medical training and family medicine, questions remain about whether it will put a dent in Ontario's primary care crisis. Patrick Swadden has this side of the story.
York University is going to train new family doctors, and Ontario needs lots of them.
So just relax for me.
2.3 million Ontarians are currently going without, a number the Ontario Medical Association expects to double in the next few years as family doctors retire, reduce patient rosters, or go into other specialties.
For perspective, 6 physicians in Sault Ste. Marie are retiring from Group Health Centre, and that led to 10,000 patients abandoned.
OMA President Dr. Andrew Park says patients without family doctors don't live as long and have a lower quality of life. He welcomes the new medical school, but
we're not going to train our way out of this problem. The greatest capacity to absorb those 2.3 million patients is what exists in the current system.
Meaning getting the family doctors we already have back into the practice, or reducing barriers so they can take on more patients.
I think it will do very little to actually improve the situation.
This family doctor isn't optimistic that a new medical school will solve the problem.
So we have over 5,500 trained family physicians in Ontario right now who are not practicing.
So, what's the problem? Well, many simply don't want to practice family medicine.
It's just really not become a sustainable thing to do to practice comprehensive family practice in Ontario.
That's why Hijazi says he's leaving family medicine, one of many to do so, citing the 20 hours a week spent on unpaid admin tasks instead of seeing patients, and pay that hasn't kept up with inflation.
The compensation that family physicians are receiving has not kept pace with the rising costs of running a business.
Kuminen says compensation for family doctors needs to be competitive with other specialties. Most family physicians are small business owners and have to pay staff and overhead costs with their OHIP funding. Meanwhile, Kuminen says a central referral system would reduce time spent on admin, as would streamlining insurance forms and eliminating the need for patient sick notes for short-term leave.
We know it is possible to turn this crisis around.
These new seats at York University, they represent Ontario's doctors of the future.
Hopefully, ending up where Ontario needs them most. Patrick Swadden, CBC News, Toronto.
Nearly 600 stolen vehicles have been recovered in the Port of Montreal. They were found as a result of a joint federal-provincial law enforcement effort called Project Vector.
390 shipping containers were opened here in Montreal, resulting in 598 stolen vehicles being recovered as a direct result of Project Vector. The recovered vehicles have a potential value of approximately $34.5 million.
Project Vector was launched in December and involves the Canada Border Services Agency, Montreal Police, the Ontario and Quebec Provincial Police, and the insurance industry. 3/4 of the recovered vehicles were stolen in Ontario. All of them were destined for Africa, Asia, Europe, the Middle East, and South America. On average, a vehicle is stolen every 5 minutes in Canada. In 2022, insurance companies paid out $1.2 billion for auto theft claims. U.S. officials say the bird flu has been detected at a poultry facility in Michigan. Michigan's Department of Agriculture and Rural Development said the bird flu has been detected in a commercial poultry facility in a county northwest of Detroit. The Associated Press is reporting a department spokesperson says state law prohibits the department from disclosing the type of poultry at the facility. In a separate case, dairy cows in Texas and Kansas were reported to be infected with bird flu last week. Federal agriculture officials later confirmed infections at a Michigan dairy herd that had recently received cows from Texas. Coming up, an update on the Baltimore bridge that collapsed. Stay tuned. Shipping through the Port of Baltimore is resuming as the cleanup of last week's deadly bridge collapse continues. Temporary channels are now allowing some vessels to move past the wreckage. CBC's Katie Simpson has gained exclusive Canadian access to the scene with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
When you get up close to the wreckage site, it really puts into perspective the scale and the scope of this catastrophe. We're maybe about 30 meters from the actual debris pile, the ship, the Dolly cargo ship, and the ongoing cleanup efforts, specially trained engineers who are using torches to shear through the metal debris as they try to cut up chunks of the wreckage into smaller, more manageable pieces so that they can be hauled away from this site in the ongoing effort to clean things up. Now, it's going to take quite some time to do. There's no real estimate as to when this site may be cleaned up. They have to move meticulously. They don't want to have an incident within an incident. There's concern that if they move too quickly, something could fall. There could be another collapse or something could move and put these crews in danger. Now, this is about as close as we can get right now. Divers are actually in the water. It's unusual because the weather has been so miserable. There's been so much rain, there's been thunder, there's been lightning, and it's made these already incredibly difficult cleanup efforts even more dangerous. So these crews, with weather and daylight permitting, are continuing to move the debris from the site. Now, there has been a little bit of encouraging news here. They have been able to get up 2 temporary channels opened up so that some of the ships can move in and out of the harbor. But for now, this is what normal looks like. Katie Simpson, CBC News in the Baltimore Harbor.
Jello is not just something you can eat, it also can be a lot of fun to throw. Some patients in a children's hospital in North Carolina did just that, and they had a blast.
It is really important to get them outside, get them thinking of something other than their diagnosis so that they can have those moments of being a child again.
The kids tossed more than 100 servings of the colored gelatin at their caregivers, who put on a brave face for the occasion. The annual event gives young patients a chance to cut loose and bond with the people who take care of them. Well, that's it for CBC Windsor News. Thanks so much for tuning in. Looking forward to seeing you back here tomorrow night.